In this workshop, we'll understand why founders often focus on 20% of their solution while missing out on 80% that's essential to getting sales. We'll discover the optimal path to convert your idea into a thriving business, and we'll explore why every startup suffers from at least one of the 5 fatal flaws. I'm Stephen White, and this is Building Lean. Hey there, awesome founders. Welcome back to Building Lean, our series of workshops that cover the steps and activities your startup must take to build key business functions to sustainably generate revenues. Our workshops are inspired by leading authors and researchers on startup and scale methodologies. People such as Eric Ries, Steve Blank, Bill Ollett, and Reid Hoffman, as well as our experience working with hundreds of startups and distilling the reasons why over 160 funded startups failed. And that's not all. We answer your burning startup questions related to how you can build your startup lean. Matter of fact, my business partner Shafiq Papa is patiently waiting to join us after this part of the workshop is over, as he'll answer questions you've already submitted related to when to pivot your startup, what comprises a minimum viable product or MVP, and what goes into getting funded by an investor. If you're interested in growing your startup by building lean, then hit the subscribe button nearby so you'll receive the latest insights that will help you avoid mistakes that cost you time and money. During our previous episode, I explored 2 different approaches to the innovation process. In comparing the lean approach and the traditional approach, it was evident why the lean approach is best, as it takes less time, costs significantly cheaper, and you get more done with a whole lot less risk. I also briefly introduced the Founder's Journey framework, which organizes the actions you need to take to validate whether your key business assumptions will lead to startup success or whether you need to take a corrective action to overcome a fatal flaw and avoid catastrophe when developing your startup idea or even growing your business. Now, you may be scratching your head thinking, what do you mean by key business assumptions? I'm just building an awesome product and looking to raise money to fuel my growth. Look, I get it. That's definitely something that Shafiq and I have heard many times before. Look, we've worked with hundreds of founders and a number of accelerators and incubators over the years. In our experience, understanding your key business assumptions grounds you in your business priorities and daily focus as a founder. So, before I explore the key business assumptions every founder makes when building their startup, let me ask you a few questions about you. And by the way, please do me a favor, leave your answers in the comments below. First off, are you part of a startup? And perhaps this means you're a founder or having joined a startup as a team member. Does your startup already have a product? And what I mean by that is it could be whether it's already built or being built or being in the process of being built. Do you truly know how much your customers are willing to pay for your product? Do you already have paying customers for your product or service? Now, if you don't, do you know how you'll reach them, how you'll find them and activate them so they'll buy from you? Since you're watching this workshop, I'm fairly confident that you're actively working on your own startup idea or thinking about what it'll take to get started, or even you want to know how to bring modern innovation techniques to your organization, all of which is perfect for this workshop here. And this means also you should take a moment to understand what a startup product or service actually is before we go any further. Now, most entrepreneurs think that their product is what their customer will pull out of a box or download from an app store, but it's not. That's only 20% of the product definition. So let's look at a physical product such as this beautiful double-walled glass coffee press. And let's imagine for a moment that this is your startup's latest product. Now, you'll notice that this double-walled glass coffee press comes in a box. Of course, that box has labeling on it that describes what it is and what it does for your customer. This box sits on a shelf where the price is labeled. The box enables a potential customer to determine the value of your product relative to all other options that they could have chose from. Before your customer found it on the shelf, you had to get it there. And then you also had to make sure that your customer knew that they could find your product on that shelf. It's up to you to figure out how to make your customer aware that your product even exists. And for that, you had to know the problem that your product solves for your customer and where that customer looks to find solutions for that specific problem that you're solving. All of this is what makes a product. All of this. The final product that you actually ship, it's only 20% of the total product definition. Instead of recognizing this, most entrepreneurs often spend over 80% of their time thinking about the final 20% of their product's development lifecycle. See, you can accidentally flip what your priorities should be because it's easy to fall in love with the final product while forgetting that it's the nitty-gritty in getting the final product to the customer and then having that customer delighted when using it that matters most. That needs to be where you spend 80% of your time, getting answers to all of those important questions before you even make your final product. Matter of fact, in terms of the actual time it takes to turn an idea into a functional beta, we may be looking at anywhere from just 3 months to 60 months, depending on the product category and assuming that you're efficient and focused. See, entrepreneurs often build products assuming that someone will buy it, those people will know how to find it, they know what someone is willing to pay for it, and that their product is going to solve someone's real problem. Those are business assumptions that often go completely untested, even though those are the ones that cause businesses to fail. Instead, what we find is that entrepreneurs focus on validating what they perceive as their biggest business assumption. Strangely enough, it's simple as, can I get my product built? When, in our perspective, in our experience, founders should be dedicated to validating the question, can I attract enough customers who want to use my product or service to solve their problem? Isn't it strange that so many continue to build products without answers to these essential business assumptions first? So, why is it that entrepreneurs often believe that these key customer-centric business assumptions will all work out just fine with reasonable and simple answers? Well, there's actually an easy reason for this. Most of us come from a professional environment where problems are well identified, and our job is simply to go about solving them. Now, before I go further about business assumptions, let's examine what an entrepreneur faces relative to something that many of us have previously experienced in our professional life. In a traditional corporation, when we encounter a problem, it's mainly an internal one. Something from within the organization, which typically means that we know what we actually want in a solution before we get started. And so when we know the problem and the solution, we go about solving the problem using a waterfall method, where we clearly document the problem in its entirety and then define the finished solution prior to building it. The reason this used to work is because you had a known problem and a known solution and plenty of resources to act. Now, more recently, when we discovered that we didn't quite fully know what the solution was prior to being implemented, modern corporations adopted an agile approach to implement small bits of a solution that delivered and tested the solution's value before building the final complete solution. So, where do you think you're operating with your startup now? Which box? Most of us believe that we know the problem, but we rarely have evidence that supports our understanding of the problem. In fact, we rely on our gut feel. As a matter of fact, most of us think we already know what our customer's problem is and what solution would solve it. So let's look at where we really are. The founder's fallacy is the classic hammer looking for a nail, except that we love our hammer so much that everything looks like a nail, and I mean everything. So, matter of fact, actually, as I think about it now, perhaps we need a support group for those of us who are guilty of the founder's fallacy. We could call it something like Founders Anonymous. And for that matter, I probably should be its first member. Hi, I'm Steven. I built yet another great product, but I have no idea how I'm going to sell this thing or who's going to buy it. Look, we need to recognize that we don't have a clear understanding of our customer problem, much less what it'll take to solve it in a profitable, scalable, value-driven manner. So do you recognize where you're at now? Is it a good idea to build your product first when you're right here? Since startups are inherently resource constrained, it was only natural that a new product development process would emerge. This would help us founders to quickly make an unknown problem known so that we could discover and validate an unknown solution to make it too known. We'll still deliver that solution with an agile approach, but now we have a clear plan of how to test the problem solution fit and what data we'll need to make product value decisions. By the way, this is why Eric Ries wrote his book, The Lean Startup, discussing his own experiences and defined a theory from his lessons learned. That theory is why we built the Founder's Journey Framework to help you learn and easily apply lean startup methodologies. So, why should you care about following a framework when there are so many great books out there for you to read on your own? Well, while most startup books are wonderful at telling us what to do and sharing interesting war stories on top of it, the purpose of the framework is to help founders like you build their startup by laying out an optimal set of steps. The Founder's Journey Framework is a step-by-step how-to approach that helps you avoid mistakes that waste time and money as you build a thriving, sustainable business fast. Most entrepreneurs are driven by their dreams of their own success. We all know that. And by the way, I'm not talking about their own selfish success, but dreams of positively improving the lives of their customers who suffer from a specific problem. This means as a founder, you know that your primary job is not to come up with just the right magic words for someone to invest in you. No, not at all. Your job is to build a sustainable, growing business. One with customers that love your product or service because that product or service solves a real, painful problem for those customers. Now, the reason why you're here at the moment is because you are your first and biggest investor. You probably want to figure out how to build your business the right way so you don't waste time and money in pursuit of your dreams. Look, we're all familiar with how you can try to do this. As we've seen plenty of startups that have tried all the alternatives that just don't work. Alternatives such as jumping right in on their own, spending months trying to teach themselves by reading startup books. We've seen people who have hired expensive consultants as if they can outsource the building of their startup. Some have chased accelerator applications prematurely with no chance to get in because they're not ready yet. Or we've even seen some spend thousands of dollars on get-rich-quick schemes. Look, there's a better way. Matter of fact, let's turn to someone who's experienced. Not long ago, the famous entrepreneur and investor Mark Andreessen answered another struggling entrepreneur's question regarding how would a business know that it succeeded in satisfying their customers' demand and therefore would be worthy of an investment from Mark. In a simple reply explaining the fit that is the basis of his investment criteria, Mark defined what product market fit is. And he tweeted, "Product market fit means being in a good market with a product that can easily satisfy that market," which is awesome. A short and simple rule here that other investors in our experience seem to echo. But what does that actually mean? And for that matter, how does a founder achieve product market fit for their startup? So Shafiq and I set off to research the best practices based on funded startups that succeeded as well as those who failed, which would allow us to decompose the actual components of product market fit and whether achieving it truly mattered. So first off, we found that achieving product market fit is absolutely critical to achieving lasting startup success and creating a sustainable competitive advantage that would keep a startup ahead of its competitors. Secondly, what our analysis also found made understanding product market fit more self-evident by using a metric-based definition. So we can look at it this way. Successful startups achieve product market fit when they have customers with the same compelling problem. That's really important, same compelling problem. When they have the ability to repeatedly reach new customers practically on demand. When they have customers willing to profitably pay to solve their problem. When they have a solution that delivers 10 times the perceived value of what those customers actually pay for their solution. When they have a validated operational plan that enables them to scale lead generation and customer sales conversion, as well as production and delivery fast before competitors move in. Now, all of this may be great, but we're still left with how does a startup achieve product market fit? So let's look back at how the founder's journey fills that gap by providing startups the structure necessary to make progress and identify flaws. Now, as I mentioned earlier, entrepreneurs are always making assumptions about their business idea, growth strategies, and operational plans. When you consciously think about it, whether you consciously think about it or not, it's your business assumptions that guide your business decisions. Like any assumption you make in any major action in your life, You need to prove if your assumption is right or wrong before you risk your limited, valuable resources. And of course, this is especially true when building a business. So for example, if you assume that you'll attract all of your customers through video-based marketing, you need to run a test to see if that's true or not. Now, why is that? Frankly, you'd hate to spend thousands of dollars and waste months to produce a bunch of videos to only find out that your customers won't watch them when you could be doing something better to attract those same customers. While achieving product market fit is the culmination of a founder's work, there are many fits along the way. Remember, it's your job to find the right fit as you validate each business assumption for each stage of building your business. So let's look at each of the 5 business assumptions in depth, starting with the first business assumption, which is the problem assumption. Now, the problem assumption is not about your problem as a founder. No, not at all. Instead, this assumption is focused on your customer's compelling problem, the one that they want someone to solve, and hopefully that someone is you. Now, the key question founders should ask themselves related to the problem assumption is, have I identified enough similar customers trying to solve the same compelling problem? When you do this successfully, you would have achieved your first fit, problem-customer fit, as this means you would have found a compelling problem that many customers have, which leads us to the second business assumption, which is the channel assumption. The channel assumption is focused on whether you're able to reach and activate your target customers. Often what we find is that founders overlook the ability to cut through the noise so that potential customers can become aware of a new solution, as well as how those customers even understand whether this new solution will solve their compelling problem. As a founder, the key question you need to ask yourself is there a channel where I can activate my identified customers? By attaining channel customer fit, you will have built a viable marketing lead engine based on the compelling problem you now understand by validating the first business assumption. See how they sequentially build on one another. And it means that you've been able to successfully run your lead generation experiments through your awareness campaigns across a variety of placement sources. This further means you will have discovered how to activate plenty of customers within your identified target market segment. Then you'll use that stream of leads generated by your marketing lead engine to prove out your third business assumption, which is the price assumption. Now, the price assumption is kind of funny. While your energies are primarily focused on the activities to develop your sales funnel, you need to prove out the price that your customers are willing to pay for your solution. Think of the price as the culmination of getting a customer through the sales funnel. Now, not only does the price define how profitable your solution will be, as well as provide a cost structure you can budget against to produce and deliver your solution, you'll also understand how your customers value your solution, which is critical when it comes to the fourth business assumption. Now, but before I jump ahead too quickly, the key question that I don't want to ignore here is that you need to be asking yourself, will customers regularly buy from me based on how I describe my solution to their problem? By proving problem solution fit, you will create a sales engine that regularly generates product sales for your business at a sustainable price. Having a sales engine that regularly attracts new customers is critical so you can get your product or service in the hands of more and more users so you can rapidly improve your solution. You can't do that in a lab or in the absence of real customer feedback. Just think about that. You can't do that on your own. Which leads us to the fourth business assumption, which is the product assumption. Like I said, being able to regularly attract paying customers means you have your users who are vested in your product working for them. Handing out freebies just won't cut it. You need those moments of truth when users either love or struggle after paying for your product or service. And you need to design how you'll be able to gather feedback on their satisfaction or disappointment, as well as actions they'll take based on whether your solution delivers on the value promised during your sales process. Which means the key question you should be asking right here is, am I able to solve my customer's problem 10 times better than existing solutions? By achieving solution customer fit, you will create the differentiated product you need to stand out from your competitors and get your customers to adopt your product over others. But there's one last fit that's essential to your startup's sustainable success. One that we touched on earlier, which brings us to the last assumption you need to validate. The fifth business assumption, which is the scale assumption. This is where you shift your focus from working in the business to working on the business. Now, if you're not familiar with this, when you work in the business, you're focused on executing your business plan. In other words, you're focused on reaching and satisfying your customers with your product or service. When you're working on the business, you're focused on improving your business operations and your product R&D so you can scale your business to stay ahead of competitors, which means that the last question you need to ask yourself is, do I know how my startup will reduce the duration and cost of marketing, sales, production, and delivery as it grows? When you achieve product market fit, you will have validated that your scale plan is viable to sustainably grow your channel, sales, and production and delivery, as this is necessary for your business to rapidly grow ahead of your competition, as well as not lose out to an established player. Now, if you're not sure where to start, don't sweat it. There's an easy answer. First off, I want to acknowledge, yes, most entrepreneurs want to start with what feels fun and exciting by first working on the fourth assumption, the product assumption, when they should start with the first assumption, the problem assumption. Remember, you don't want to build a known solution for an unknown, vague, general problem. You want to start by confirming your understanding of a specific, detailed problem that's compelling for a defined set of customers that want their problem solved now. Just think about that for a moment. How could you possibly develop a solution if you don't even understand the problem you're solving for? You're just fumbling around in a dark room, just hoping you get lucky enough to hit a light switch. Plus, most investors won't even bother talking to you unless you've proven that you know how to reach and engage your target customer, which can only happen when you understand the compelling problem that customer is experiencing. Now, the great thing about the key questions related to each of the 5 key business assumptions is that they complement the 3 startup development phases so that you can understand exactly what you need to do, what you need to accomplish as you work through each phase. So let's take an example, say market validation. During the market validation phase, you can use a founder's journey framework to guide you through the activities and milestones of building your manual version of your lead engine and sales engine, as well as your functional prototype, to prove whether your idea is market viable. Whereas in the repeatable sales and delivery phase, you can use the founder's journey framework to guide you in creating a self-serve version of your lead engine and sales engine. By having the necessary structure to convert your manual lead engine and your manual sales engine into automated engines, you will reduce the effort you and your team need to take as you scale your business. And you'll have the metrics necessary to determine whether you're on track with this process. Plus, the Founder's Journey Framework guides you in building, refining, and delivering your differentiated product using the virtuous rapid improvement cycle based on metric-driven customer feedback. Oh, of course, I'd be remiss if I ignored the 3rd startup development phase, which is sustainable growth. So let's talk about that for a moment. This is where the Founder's Journey Framework guides your focus when building a scalable lead engine, a scalable sales engine, and a scalable production and delivery engine that results in a continuous product improvement cycles, helping your startup attain the position of a market-leading product, which is fantastic, what every entrepreneur strives for. During a continuous improvement cycle, your team is driving the key metrics necessary for your product to perform measurably better than any competitors within the chosen dimension of the problem your product is solving. Now, I'll go deeper into what I mean when talking about problem dimensions during our next workshop, but for now, let me leave you with this brief example. So here's the setup. If you expect to dramatically drop the cost of, say, solving a customer's problem when compared to how existing alternatives solve it today, you must have a plan that will help you continue to drop the price of your product as measured against the value being delivered. So, good example of this would be the original PC. For something like 20 straight years, as in year after year, PCs got cheaper and faster before the PC market matured. Now, that market was brutally competitive until it matured as each competitor developed its own scale plan, and a handful were able to sustainably grow as they competed to solve their customers' problem related to demands over product pricing and compute speed. Now, I want to jump back to one more thing about the framework. The reason why you validate each assumption in order is because, frankly, there's a dependency between assumptions. which means you can't skip one to get to another just because you really want to work on that other one. And for that matter, you don't want to waste energy and valuable resources on tasks that'll end up requiring rework when an earlier assumption that you skipped over proves to be wrong. By following an ordered, logical approach, both you and your team are better able to focus and overcome fatal flaws that all startup ideas have. And the bonus benefit? Well, frankly, when an advisor or friend gives you that odd bit of advice, you'll be able to sort out what's a distraction from what you need to focus on to achieve your next milestone. No more mentor whiplash. That's awesome. Now I would say that we've gone pretty deep into how the framework can guide you in building your startup. So I think it's time we shift into something that many founders just want to avoid talking about: fatal flaws. Based on our research and analysis, there are 5 fatal flaws founders encounter with their startup idea. Now, these flaws are quite common, and nearly every founder will encounter at least one or maybe more of them with their startup. So let's begin with the first fatal flaw, in that your product idea doesn't solve a compelling problem for your customer. This is typically when you've developed a product before understanding the compelling problem your customer wants solved. In this case, you've built that hammer looking for a nail, and now all of your time is being spent looking for some nails. With the second fatal flaw, it takes you too long and costs too much to generate sales leads. You feel like you're dying the death of 1,000 paper cuts as you struggle to attract customers and perpetually wait on leads to convert to sales. With the third fatal flaw, your potential customers reject the price for your product or solution. Now, often this is due to a startup overestimating the value of their solution, or frankly, a founder who used, say, a free option to attract new customers, and now that founder is struggling to provide enough value with an upgraded product or service to get customers to convert by selecting one of their pricing options. With the fourth fatal flaw, your product idea lacks differentiation and is easily copied by competitors. Many entrepreneurs fall into the trap of developing a Me Too product for a different market segment, not realizing that they're in fact leaving breadcrumbs for an established or more nimble competitor to outrun their market approach. Sure. It's tempting to think that if you simply copy a known product but add, say, some premium or even downgraded features, depending on your target market, that you should be able to win the day with your chosen customer segment. Often that's justification that Shafiq and I hear. That justification is that a founder has seen another startup pull this off successfully, but that typically overlooks that success was sustainable, whether that success was sustainable, as well as how successful Me Too startups often have a plan to leap past their initial Me Too product by delivering their own innovation that differentiates it when compared to competitors. With the fifth fatal flaw, your business is too complex and too difficult to grow efficiently. For many entrepreneurs who encounter this fatal flaw, it's due to them relying on their own effort, extraordinary personal effort to having built their business to this point. If you think about it, effectively, they've created a Rube Goldberg-like machine to keep their business afloat and serve their customers. However, in this case, if one thing breaks, the whole machine shuts down with more flexible competitors passing them by while the founder tries to recover. Now, this all sounds both scary and kind of great to know in advance. So let's look at a couple of real-world products to better understand the consequences of ignoring a fatal flaw and missing an opportunity to implement the necessary corrective action. Bruvelo. Bruvelo launched a Kickstarter campaign back in 2015 with a fascinating single cup coffee maker that integrated all the functions that coffee nerds like me love. Burr grinder, consistent water temperature, full saturation of the grinds. Yet the actual problem it solved wasn't compelling enough to change my habit as someone who drinks way more than 1 cup of coffee. Plus, they added an app that allowed me to manage my coffee preparation, which is great, but all of this was at a substantially high price of over $400. GoPro Karma Drone, a slick, well-designed drone that provided 3 functions in one device by offering a detachable 4K camera, a 3-axis gimbal, and the drone itself. With GoPro's reputation for quality, durable products, the Karma drone had one unintended feature in its initial release. It unexpectedly fall from the sky. which, in case you've never bought a drone before, it's not exactly a feature that drone owners are looking for. Nonetheless, GoPro pulled the Karma from the market to make the fixes necessary and relaunched a year later. Here's the thing. As Bruvelo couldn't solve a compelling problem or deliver product value relative to price, its Kickstarter campaign failed as it only raised 60% of its campaign goal. While GoPro was able to relaunch the Karma drone with its second generation product, which I happen to own, the market had already passed it by. The product reputation from the previous failures, along with missing features such as collision avoidance, led GoPro to cancel the entire product line. Now, by now, you probably have noticed that the 5 fatal flaws correspond pretty directly to the 5 key business assumptions in the Founder's Journey framework. Like I mentioned earlier, in our experience, nearly every idea has at least one fatal flaw in its original conception. So, while it's great that you understand what the 5 fatal flaws are, it's more important that you go beyond just identifying the fatal flaws that your business may have. That's right. You may be thinking, what am I supposed to do once I identify my startup's fatal flaw? My answer to that is, don't worry. We're going to address that. We're going to address what corrective actions you should take for each fatal flaw in our upcoming workshops. What's important to remember is that throughout the framework, you focus on validating your business assumptions by having customers take specific actions that create the evidence that you need to know that you're on the right track. This means that you'll have significant sample sizes from validation testing, which will provide you confidence, which is great, and allow you to reproduce the test if you find an assumption later becomes invalidated due to a fatal flaw. Those data-driven insights, by the way, are the same ones investors are looking for when deciding which startup to fund. Keep in mind, all 5 of the key business assumptions can be validated in a pretty timely manner. You don't need years if you stay dedicated and focused on following a lean process. Remember, you are your first investor. That's why you need to hold yourself accountable to this timeline. It's your time and money at stake. Now, we're here to help you stay on track as well. My only caveat is that these timeframes assume that you're working on your startup full time. Now, the good thing, though, is that you can validate whether your startup idea is market viable without even leaving your existing job, which is something I strongly recommend to new founders. If you are working part-time on your startup, that's fine. Perfectly makes sense. But just keep in mind, your timeline for achieving the market validation phase may be a bit slower. Just don't let that be your excuse to lose focus or let the timeline stretch by adding unnecessary delays. Time is never a founder's friend, but focus is. Now, when we get asked by founders, how should they plan changes to their lifestyle when pursuing their startup idea? Shafik and I find that founders are probably ready to dedicate themselves to full-time to their startup somewhere during the second startup development phase of repeatable sales and delivery, as by then they would have hit their $10,000 in monthly revenue milestone. I want you to recall one thing. That's a revenue and not profit milestone. There's a difference. You may need to adjust your personal budget relative to you and your team's salaries or raise an investment round as a result. By the way, when you achieve the third startup development phase, sustainable growth, you'll be fully engulfed in your startup with a team as you would have already proven out your underlying business principles and you're focused on rapid growth of your business. Now, I want to end with one last thing. Being an entrepreneur can often feel lonely, which is why we welcome you to reach out to us directly for help or even just some personal encouragement. Also, please remember, this is the founder's journey that every single entrepreneur must go through, regardless of what business you're creating, where you're located, who you are, or how much money you have. Hey, you don't have to travel the founder's journey alone. We're with you each step of the way. In our upcoming workshops, we'll cover many of the resources that our incubator members use to turn their startup ideas into revenue-generating businesses. If you don't want to wait for those workshops, or if you want to know how to use those resources now, please apply today to join the Lean Master Incubator, as we have dozens of tools, templates, and how-to guides that apply directly to the right phase and stage as you work on your startup. It's these incubator resources, along with access to dedicated expert feedback, that make it easy for you to organize your work, communicate with your team, customers, and investors, make better decisions faster, and accomplish more, which will help you become a rock star entrepreneur. During our next workshop, we'll dive deeper into the problem assumption as something I mentioned a little bit earlier as we explore what comprises a compelling problem and what experienced entrepreneurs look for when identifying problems we're solving. Now, before I hand over to Shafiq to answer your questions, if you're looking to change how you grow your startup by building lean and you find these workshops helpful, please click the subscribe button nearby and give us a like or drop a positive comment. And if you know of other founders or product managers who could benefit from our workshops, please share this video with them so they too can build their startups lean and avoid mistakes that cost time and money. Building Lean is brought to you by the Lean Mastery Incubator. Lean Mastery helps founders convert their ideas into a thriving business fast and helps business owners avoid mistakes that cost time and money. Learn more about how you can become a Lean Mastery Incubator member at leanmastery.co. Thank you for watching, everyone. And now over to Shafiq to get us started with answering your burning startup questions.
Hi everyone, Shafiq here. Now that you know why working through your business assumptions in a systematic fashion is the optimal path that helps you and your team avoid rework, we're going to pivot to answering questions submitted by founders. Steven, are you ready with our first question?
Yes, I am, Shafiq. Thanks very much. All right, let me check here. Okay. It looks like our first question comes from a new entrepreneur who's been working on their startup for about 6 months now. And it appears according to my notes here, this person's been hearing from their advisors that they may need to pivot, especially, and it seems to be especially related to some struggles that they're experiencing related to social distancing during the pandemic. So our founder's question is, what is a pivot and why should any startup pivot away from their original idea?
Oh, that's a great question, Steven. So pivots are nothing more than an attempt to fix a fatal flaw you identified as you work through the 5 key business assumptions about your idea. So in practice, sometimes pivot work, other times they don't. Generally, startups pivot because the market is telling them that one or more of their business assumptions is simply not true. So a famous example of pivots are when PayPal pivoted away from private payments conducted through a handheld Palm Pilot to web-based private payments. Their solution just did not fit as the Palm Pilot was not being used by many prospects in their developing online auction places like eBay. The rise of eBay created a large volume of eager users looking to conduct private transactions. Note at the time, PayPal had validated the problem, the channel, price, but they simply could not get enough transaction on the product assumption as it conceived it, which is an important lesson for founders. Never bet the farm on a specific solution. Keep your thinking flexible and look to serve the customers where they are. As a founder, you don't want to be in the preaching business. Instead, you want to find the converted and give them what will help them solve their problem. In PayPal's case, they didn't need to evangelize the need for quick and easy payments through a mobile device. Instead, they needed to recognize the growing demand for managing risk between two private parties and provide a solution that helped them solve their problem.
That's a great analogy, Shafiq, especially in the evangelization part. I think we run across a lot of founders who feel like they need to preach to their customers, and their customers will convert. One thing that came to mind when you're talking, if I can add in, you're right. There have been a number of famous pivots that really were the startups recognizing that their customers valued a key feature that solved a problem, a real problem that the original startup idea missed. An example that kind of comes to my mind is how Instagram grew out of the check-in app Bourbon. So as I understand it, the original app of Bourbon was similar to other check-in apps that were popular at the time, like Foursquare, except in Bourbon's case, it used pictures of the person's check-in to validate that the person was actually there. So that was kind of their novel way to make sure people weren't faking the check-in. It just so happened because the Bourbon founders wanted to make the pictures taken look interesting, they added photo filters, which merged functionality from other photo apps that just did photo filters, but Bourbon put a social element to them as allowed them to share. So it seems like what happened is quickly the Bourbon founders recognized that their users actually didn't need another check-in app, but instead loved sharing their edited photos. Hence, Instagram was born, and 9 months after they launched and really hit ran through market validation and everything else, they were purchased by Facebook for $1 billion, which often gives founders the wrong story, which is if you launch an app, within 9 months you're going to get bought by Facebook for $1 billion, but they totally miss all of the years of suffering and struggles that the Instagram founders actually went through. So it seems like, just as you described, Shafiq, pivoting for the sake of pivoting is worthless, and founders need to be pivoting with a purpose. So especially when a more compelling problem, when they identify a more compelling problem that is more reachable by them, and that's all possible. So, okay, our next question comes from someone who's thinking about pursuing their business dream by starting a business, and she wants to know, what is an MVP? And this doesn't have anything, as far as I understand, related to sports. So I'll let you jump in, Shafiq.
Wow. The term MVP stands for minimum viable product. Unfortunately, it's one of the most misused terms out there. And a lot of it has to do with, Stephen, what you went over in your workshop. I think in your workshop you covered how a product really is a whole lot more than simply the final little thing that people pull out of a box. It's everything that leads to them pulling that product out. So they had to become aware of it. They had to be able to make up their mind, make a decision to purchase it, and then they could experience the product and adopt it to actually help us solve their problem. So when we think of the MVP, we really need to think of 3 different parts to an MVP. An MVP should help you generate qualified leads. In other words, it helps you in lead generation. It should definitely convert those qualified leads. So the second part would be the one that converts the qualified leads into actual paying sales, so sales conversion. And then the third part would be the product, which is the whole product adoption journey that we'll cover in the next workshop. And a lot of that has to do with making sure that the product is not just simply pull out of the box and then thrown on a shelf or discarded, but actually gets used and adopted by the user, which means that they would tell others about it, that eventually lowers your marketing costs and so on. So the MVP is the minimum part you need during the market validation phase for each of those 3 components. And then in the repeated sales engine, repeated sales and delivery portion of the phase of the startup development, the MVPs change. They become much more self-serve. So the minimum viable product there has a different purpose. It's not just to simply generate a manual lead or a manual sale, but it's to try and automate those so the person can self-serve, can become aware because they saw an ad, and the ad engine is being run because you automated through Facebook or click ads, whatever the right channel that you developed was. It could also be like, you could have a YouTube channel. There are all kinds of ways you can develop a channel. But the qualified lead it's an inbound lead, and then your sales engine takes over and they can self-serve and make a decision to purchase. And then finally, the last part is where you can consistently deliver that in the repeated sales and delivery. You can consistently produce the product and deliver it to them and take them through the buyer's journey so they adopt it. So minimum viable product changes depending on which phase of the business you're in. It's not like one consistent, long definition or one singular definition that stays the same. It depends. It depends if you're in market validation versus repeated sales or delivery. And of course, in scale, it changes even further. So a minimum viable product is always changing, and it depends on where you are in the startup development phase. Does that make sense?
Yeah, thanks for making that clear. Actually, I got to tell you, Shafiq, MVP was one of the phrases I heard a lot when I first was going back through doing startups again over the last few years, and I really struggled and actually kind of hated that acronym for a while because it was so unclear, and I felt like we couldn't get a detailed understanding. I think you actually summarized it really well, and frankly, I think entrepreneurs have a tendency to make acronyms and lingo sound much more intimidating than that need be, which keeps potentially awesome founders on the sidelines, or for that matter, uncertain whether they should even ask a question like that. So I'm really glad this founder asked that question, because otherwise it almost feels like going to Starbucks for the first time and you're worrying about screwing up your order when you just want a coffee. All right. So let's see, last question here. And it looks like we're on a streak with another relatively new entrepreneur. And this question comes from someone who recently lost their job due to the downturn. We're sorry to hear that. Hopefully this is an inflection point of something positive that's going to happen for you. And this person wants to go forward in pursuing his startup idea. So Shafiq, his question is, when should I raise money?
Okay, that's another good question. So clearly, the obvious answer would be as soon as you're ready, and of course before you run out, right? So you don't want to ever run out of money as a founder. That's always painful. But you also have to be scrappy. So when you're starting out as an entrepreneur, you want to make sure you're ready. You have enough money to get started and to be able to make some progress. If you're trying to like instantly turn up revenues, then startup maybe not the right answer for you. Maybe getting a job is. But if you're able to invest some time and some resources to getting market validation, that can take up to 12 weeks and maybe a little bit longer. Depends on what, how complicated of a product you're trying to work and what the market's trying to serve, whether whether things fall your way or not. But the main thing is that as a founder, you have to be prepared to be able to raise money when you need to, which means you have to be ready. So how do you know you're ready? Well, you know you're ready when you've at least gotten market validation. And in some rare cases, that works. But here's the thing that we've learned. In our experience, angels and VCs look for signs. Are you a one-hit wonder, or can you consistently deliver results? So in our methodology, if you just gotten market validation, that's good. That means you should continue working and continue investing for yourself. But if you're going to ask somebody else to invest, the next thing you have to conquer is repeated sales. When you can repeatedly generate qualified leads and then convert those leads into sales, that's when you're ready. Because that's what enables you to get into that virtuous cycle that Stephen talked about in his earlier workshops, where you can quickly improve the product. So as long as you're getting some early sales, you can deliver whatever version of the product you got, get feedback, and then get into the next iteration and the next iteration, next iteration, so that you can quickly get to that, what we would call the mainstream market product. So what I would say is the surest way to get an investor to write you a check is to constantly announce you have one more new sale. And we can do that once a week or once a month, depending on if you're doing B2B or a consumer. And if you're doing consumer, you can say, hey, we just sold another 30, another 50. But if you're doing B2B, having that monthly close and letting them know what that added to the backlog is like a tremendous way of gaining their confidence. And that's when they're going to release a check. We've seen lots of people get affirmatives from both the angels and VCs, but what they never do is they never write the check till the next sale comes. And if the sale takes too long, then they just kind of wait till the next one to see if you're actually conquering sales or not. So if you want to get that check in your hand by the time you need it, not when it's too late, then you're going to make sure you're conquering sales fast. You can quickly take them through the buyer's journey and get that signed contract. That's the surest way of delivering sales. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, absolutely. So, all right, everyone. Shafiq's laying down some awesome strategy for you here. And if you're not sending in questions, you're missing out. So if you're looking to build your startup lean, please click the link nearby or drop your question in the comments below. Also, please subscribe to our channel so you can receive immediate access to our latest episodes. Building Lean has been brought to you by the Lean Mastery Incubator. Lean Mastery helps founders convert their ideas into a thriving business fast and helps business owners avoid mistakes that cost time and money. Learn more about how you can become a Lean Mastery Incubator member at leanmastery.co. Thank you everyone for watching, and we look forward to helping you be successful in pursuing your startup dreams by building lean.